When Grigori Rasputin finally died in 1916, his killers thought they were ending a nightmare. For years, this wandering Siberian mystic had slithered his way into the heart of the Russian monarchy. He advised the Tsarina, whispered to the Tsar, and built a reputation as both a holy man and a scandalous deviant. And to his enemies, he was the Mad Monk, a peasant-turned-prophet who corrupted Russia's royal family. To his supporters, he was a healer, a visionary, even a saint. But to history, he became something stranger. A man whose afterlife became almost as bizarre as his life. Because long after his murder, stories spread that Rasputin's most infamous body part had survived him, preserved, worshipped, and passed around like a relic. The rise of Rasputin, born in 1869 in Siberia. Rasputin started as a wandering mystic, drifting from village to village. By the early 1900s, he had made his way to St. Petersburg, where his piercing eyes and hypnotic charisma won him a following. But what truly made him indispensable was his connection to the Romanovs. The Tsar's only son, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia, a deadly disease at the time. Rasputin seemed able to calm the boy's bleeding episodes, whether by prayer, hypnosis, or sheer luck. To the desperate royal family, this wasn't coincidence, it was miracle. And so Rasputin became a fixture in the palace, influencing decisions, angering ministers, and earning enemies at every level of Russian society. A reputation of excess part of Rasputin's myth was his insatiable appetites. He was notorious for his drunken binges, his womanizing, and his ecstatic religious rituals that blurred the line between worship and debauchery. His enemies portrayed him as a seducer who corrupted noble women and nuns alike. Cartoons and newspapers mocked him as a demonic puppet master clutching the Tsarina. And whispers about his sexual prowess became legendary, exaggerated, mocked, and feared in equal measure. So when he finally died, it was almost inevitable that his body, or at least parts of it, would become symbols of the legend. The assassination by 1916, Russia was collapsing under the strain of World War I. Food shortages, battlefield disasters, and political unrest threatened the monarchy. Rasputin, seen as a corrupting influence over the Tsarina Alexandra, became a target for nobles who believed killing him would save the empire. On a cold December night, a group of conspirators lured him to a nobleman's palace. They poisoned him with cyanide. When that didn't kill him, they shot him. When he still staggered forward, they shot him again. Finally, they bound him and dumped him into an icy river. His body was later recovered, waterlogged, bullet-ridden, and battered, and buried quietly. But the legend of his resilience was born. Rasputin, the man who wouldn't die. Body burned. Rumors begin weeks later. As revolution brewed, Rasputin's body was exhumed and burned by soldiers. The Romanov dynasty itself soon followed, swept away in 1917 by the Bolsheviks. And that should have been the end of him. But Rasputin was too strange to rest quietly. Almost immediately, rumors began to swirl. The parts of his body had survived the fire. And one rumor in particular stuck, that his severed penis had been removed, preserved, and smuggled out of Russia. The relic of lust. Why that body part? Because it fit perfectly with his legend. Rasputin's virility had been exaggerated in life, both by admirers and enemies. Some women believed sleeping with him granted spiritual purification. Others swore he had supernatural powers of seduction. So the idea that his penis had been kept as a relic was almost inevitable. It was grotesque, but it matched the myth. By the 1920s and 30s, émigrés Russians whispered stories of secret cults venerating the holy relic. Decades later, tales emerged of Rasputin's severed organ surfacing in Paris, passed between collectors like a perverse saint's bone. Whether true or not, the rumor added a new chapter to his bizarre saga. Rasputin the mystic, Rasputin the lover, Rasputin the dismembered relic. Closing of Section 1, so here's the setup. A mystic who rose from Siberian obscurity to control the Russian court. A reputation for lust, excess, and scandal that made him infamous. A violent murder that seemed to confirm his demonic myth, the man who refused to die, and rumors that even after his body was burned, part of him lived on, passed around as the strangest relic of all. In Section 2, we'll trace the bizarre journey of that relic, from Paris salons to Russian museums, and ask whether the legend of Rasputin's severed organ was ever real, or just another tall tale in the life of a man too strange to forget. After Rasputin's body was burned in 1917, most men would have faded into the ash of history. But Rasputin was not most men. His life was already legend, and his death only made the stories wilder. And the strangest tale of all? That one particular piece of him survived, passed around like a relic, worshipped, mocked, and eventually mistaken for seafood. Yes, we're talking about Rasputin's penis. The relic emerges. The first whispers began among Russian émigrés in Paris in the 1920s. Rumor had it that Rasputin's daughter, Maria, had preserved part of her father and carried it west when she fled. Others claimed a group of women in Paris treated it as a fertility charm, gathering to venerate it in private rituals. No one could prove these stories, but they spread fast, fueled by Rasputin's already lurid reputation. To some, the relic was grotesque. To others, it was a joke. But to a few, it was sacred, the ultimate symbol of Rasputin's infamous power over women. The Paris connection by mid-century, reports placed the relic in Paris, passed between collectors like a macabre curiosity. In one version, émigré aristocrats whispered of it kept in a box, shown to dinner guests after too much wine. In another, it was hidden away by an obscure Rasputin cult that saw him as a saint of lust and liberation. Whether real or imagined, the stories gave Rasputin an afterlife stranger than his own career at court. The museum years, the most famous claim, came in the 1990s, when a Russian museum of erotica announced it had obtained Rasputin's preserved penis. The item, a shriveled, brownish object about a foot long, was displayed in a glass jar to stun visitors. Tourists gawked. Reporters wrote articles with barely disguised glee. For a while, the relic became one of St. Petersburg's oddest attractions, a scandalous symbol of Russia's most infamous mystic. The sea cucumber twist, but science had the last laugh. Researchers who examined the specimen concluded it wasn't human at all. In fact, it wasn't even animal. It was a dried sea cucumber, preserved, yes, but not Rasputin's legendary manhood. The revelation only made the story stranger. Had someone faked the relic? Had decades of rumor led to a jar of seafood? Or had the real item, if it ever existed, been lost long ago, replaced by a convenient stand-in? Whatever the truth, the legend was too good to die. Even after the debunking, many people still half believed, because the myth fit the man. Rasputin's larger-than-life myth, what's striking is how easily people believed the tale in the first place. It wasn't just because Rasputin was scandalous. It was because his entire legend revolved around power, spiritual power, political power, and above all, sexual power. His enemies caricatured him as a lustful demon who seduced Russia's women. His admirers hinted he carried a kind of divine, sensual energy. So when the rumor arose that his organ had survived, people didn't question it. They nodded and said, of course it did. He was Rasputin, the relic that outlived the man. The irony is that Rasputin, a man who claimed to serve God, is remembered less for his prayers than for his appetites. His name lives on in jokes, songs, and tabloid-style legends. And perhaps that's fitting. His afterlife has been just as chaotic as his life. Because while his body was dumped in a fire, his reputation proved indestructible, even when reduced to a sea cucumber in a jar. Closing of Section 2, so here's the tally. Rasputin murdered, shot, poisoned, drowned, and burned. Rumors that his severed penis survived as a relic of lust and power. Decades of whispers in Paris salons and émigré circles. A Russian museum displaying a jarred specimen later identified as seafood. And a legacy where truth and myth blurred until no one cared which was which. The story may be absurd, grotesque, and unbelievable. But then again, so was Rasputin, because the mad monk of Russia may have been hard to kill in life. But in death, his legend and his anatomy proved impossible to bury.